Are you ready?
Activate.
Sequence start 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
From the beautiful mountains of western North Carolina, just outside the Blue Ridge Parkway, under the stars and around our mysterious blue planet, you are listening to Shadows in the Dark.
Shadows in the dark.
Well, I hope everyone's having a good week. We are here in beautiful western North Carolina. It's been a beautiful week, good weather, although we could use a little rain, which I think we could most anywhere. Well, I want to kind of tell everybody how to get to the archives because Blog Talk's changed the site around, so it's a little different than what it was before. We mentioned this a couple shows back, so I just want to kind of go back over it again just to make sure everybody understands. Once you go to the site and you go to our host page, which is blogtalkradio.com/shadowsinthedark, you'll see our logo over there, and right below it, you'll see a few little options, and one of them says subscribe via RSS. And what you're going to do is you're going to click on that, and if you choose to subscribe to it, you don't even have to visit the host page to listen to the archives. You could just go straight off of it. And if you've got Internet Explorer 7, then it saves it right in there, another browser that automatically keeps your RSS or your XML feed. So that's how you can listen to the archives. And I'm looking at some possible way to get them on the site, and we can just start listening to them from there. I can download them, but I'm trying to figure out the easiest way that will be to make that possible for you guys. Also, Halloween. We have had a couple people ask what we're going to do for a Halloween special. So what we're going to do to let you know is now our next poll, we're going to reveal it this coming Sunday. So if you haven't already participated in that poll, please go ahead and do so. But after we reveal that, what we're going to do is we're going to put up another poll, and we're going to throw out some ideas of what to do for our Halloween show. Now, we are going to broadcast Halloween night that week, and we're going to, same time though, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so we're going to end Halloween Day, the last hour on the show. But we want to know what you want for the Halloween special. So we're going to throw up some options up there. You choose it, vote on it. Whatever wins, that's what we're going to do. And we're going to run it for about 3 weeks from the normal 2 weeks. So that way also gives me maybe a week to prepare for the show in case I have to try to get a guest. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to let you decide what to do for the Halloween special. So that should be fun. And we haven't decided if we're going to let you know right off the bat, or are we going to just let it be a surprise. We may do that. Now also, we've got a few new items in our shop. You want to check that out, just go to our homepage, shadowsinthedarkradio.com. You'll see the link up at the top that says shop. Just click on it. Got a few bumper stickers, hats, things like that. So if you get the time, check it out. We're really excited about getting that up. Now, we have a really great show tonight. I'm really excited about this guest we have on. His name's Oliver Williams, and he is the editor of JohnTeeter.com, which is a very, very fascinating story about a time traveler. So we're going to take a quick little break, and as soon as we get back, we're going to talk about John Teeter with Oliver Williams. Oliver Williams is the website editor for the time travel story of John Titor. He first saw John Titor's internet postings in the fall of 2002. After reading many of the sites where John was discussed, it amazed Oliver as to how much polarization and confrontation John's posts caused. Oliver soon realized that part of the problem was that there was no one place where all the posts could be easily seen. So in early 2003, Oliver gathered the posts that John had left online and edited them down to a single website. Oliver, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we talked a little bit earlier before the show started. Like I said, this John Titor story is just one of the most fascinating stories I've really ever heard. It invokes so much thought into, is this really possible? So can you start off and tell us exactly who John Titor claimed to have been?
Absolutely. John Titor was a personality who appeared on the Internet in November of 2000. And he appeared in a chat room where people were talking about time travel. And he basically told people that he was a time traveler, that he was here for a specific reason. And from a period of about 3 months, he answered questions. He talked about how time travel worked, why he was here, what the future looked like. And people asked him all sorts of questions, and he answered them. And then, just as abruptly, in March of 2001, he said he was leaving, and he left. And nobody ever heard anything from him again after that.
Oh, wow. Now, what did he claim that he was here for?
He claims to have been from the year 2036, and that he was on a mission, a military mission, to go back to 1975 to get a very obscure personal computer that was manufactured by IBM then. It was called the 5100. And he claimed that they needed this in the future to work on or solve certain problems that they were having with their computer systems. And when I tell you that, it might sound kind of ridiculous, but the background is that he claimed that there was something special about this computer that allowed scientists or engineers in the future to communicate with these large mainframe computers that weren't working correctly. Now, the thing that's interesting is after John had left, IBM engineers came forward, and I actually have some of the email, and they've actually been in the news, and they said that, yes, what he was describing is real, and it's true, and there are only a handful of people that knew about this. So that was one shot that said, either this guy knew about it, if he wasn't a time traveler, he had this information about the computer, or he was who he said he was and he knew what he was looking for. And that's just one of many things that's like that, which is one of the things that makes the story so compelling. The reason that he came to our time is not exactly clear in his posts, but he sort of cryptically gave us some clues about why he was here. He was concerned about his family and something that he had done in the 70s that might have changed the future from that point on, and he was concerned about that, and that's why he came here in the year 2000.
Now, because, yeah, he also traveled to 1975 to talk to one of the individuals that worked directly on this computer, correct?
Yeah, in fact, he pointed out that it was actually his grandfather, which is one of the reasons why he was chosen for this mission. So he was, he was in the military. He was given this mission. He went back in time. He communicated with his grandfather, and apparently, did his mission. Was able to get one of these computers and bring it back to the future.
Now, what did he say? What specifically the computer was? I mean, did it have a name or anything like that?
Yeah, it was the IBM 5100. And if you do a Google search for it, you can find it. It's basically what they would call a computer, or a portable computer back then. It was something that you could set on a tabletop, and it had a small screen and a keyboard, and the very basics of what we now take for granted. But apparently, the thing that made this computer unique was it had the ability to communicate and program in multiple programming languages. I think BASIC and APL were the two languages that this thing could communicate in. And he said that the reason they needed this particular computer was because they could connect it, or they could use it with these huge mainframes, and then they could translate the language. And apparently that was very difficult to do unless you had something portable to do it. And that was a specific reason why they went back to get that computer. And one other thing, too, people would say, you know, that seems really ridiculous. If they had all this technology and they could send people to time, why would they need this computer? However, one of the stories that's on our site, NASA scours eBay looking for parts for the space shuttle because, of course, they don't make them anymore. So it's not a ridiculous idea that with all this high technology, we would have to go scrounging around for old parts to solve new problems with this new technology.
Well, you know, that can kind of go along the lines that sometimes the most basic thing is the solution to the most complicated problem, and that could be the case right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, did he really get much into his time machine and exactly how it all worked?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that was one of the first things he talked about when he was online, and he went into great detail about how his time machine worked. And actually, this was one of the things that caught my attention when I first read the post. You know, I got into this after he was gone by almost a year, and of course, I read everything that he wrote. You know, I stayed up all night and get to bed till about 4 o'clock. One of the first things he said specifically, this was in early 2000. He said in fall of 2001, CERN, which is a huge physics research laboratory in Geneva, Switzerland, they are going to announce that they're going to expect to be able to create mini black holes in the laboratory. And of course, if you look at the news now, that's exactly what they're expecting to do. Actually, I think it's later this year or next year. But the announcement came out in September of 2001, exactly when he said it would. And that was the first thing that caught my attention.
Right.
So I started reading the rest of the posts, and he talks in great detail about how the time machine works. Basically, he claims that you can manipulate huge gravitational fields by capturing mini black holes that were created in a laboratory. And his time machine was roughly the size of a large suitcase, which contained these 2 mini black holes and the computers and the gravity sensors and all the other things that they needed to make it work. And apparently, it allowed him to go forward or backward. You know, I'd like to explain this too a little bit based on what he talked about. But it allowed you to go into the past, into the future, and he said there was a limit on it of 60 years. You know, you couldn't go as far as you wanted. You couldn't go back and see Christ born, or you couldn't go 2,000 years in the future. It had a limit of 60 years. So that was basically how I described it working.
And just so the listeners know, we do have some pictures that Teeter actually posted himself when he was around on our homepage, shadowsinthedarkradio.com. We've got a little slideshow going. And Oliver, you also have pictures on your site, johnteeter.com, correct? Okay.
Yeah, and again, if you do a Google search and just hit images, you're going to see everything that he put up. But there's one interesting thing about that since you bring it up. One of those drawings is a technical drawing. It looks like a cutaway. And that was one of the pictures that he posted. And, of course, he said all those pictures came from his operations manual that was part of the time machine. And for a long time, people have been trying to figure out what that is. When you look at it, it obviously looks like some sort of a machine. And there was a lot of speculation that it was some sort of a radio, you know, a military radio or some sort of radiation detector. And to date, nobody has been able to come forward and say, this is exactly what it is and here's the drawing. So whatever that is, it's a real machine, but nobody can figure out exactly what it is.
Have you heard of anybody that's tried to in any way duplicate it just off of the pictures he posted?
Actually, that's another interesting thing, and this just came to me when she said that. About 2 months ago, I got an email from somebody who found this. Apparently, somebody has taken out a patent on the operation, the way John described it, how the time machine works. I think there's a way to go online and find it, but it looks like a legitimate patent put up by, I think it's either an engineer or a scientist, on the basic operation of the time machine based on the way John described it working.
Wow, interesting. It is definitely very, very interesting. And, you know, it makes you wonder, too, if he said all things that eventually enabled him to time travel, you know, by putting that out there, somebody putting a patent on it, just, you know, like I said, this is a very thought-provoking story, and I'll be honest, like, you know, I've visited your site, johnteeter.com, many times, and you seriously cannot get away from it. I mean, once you start reading, you get, hooked, and you just keep reading and reading. It's just that fascinating.
Well, you know, Yeah, I appreciate that, and it's interesting that you bring that up too, because in the last couple of months there's been another development which is sort of going under the radar, but I find this fascinating. When John was here and he talked about how time travel worked, he was very specific. He said alternate realities are real. This is how it works. He made statements about Stephen Hawking that came to pass. He made statements about the physics and how it all worked, and was very, very specific. And back then, the idea of alternate realities and bending gravity and time travel itself was patently ridiculous. Nobody believed it. There was no scientist who would come forward and say it's possible. Now jump forward 7 years, and again, just go in the news and look up alternate realities, look up time travel. You're going to see reputable scientists now coming forward saying, yeah, it is possible. In addition, if you look at the way that they're describing their theory, it is exactly the way John said it worked. So I'm wondering if one of the reasons he was here was to leak this information out this way so that the people that understood it would pick up on it and they go, yeah, you know what, there is something to this. Ronald Mallet, John Kramer, there's another scientist in Israel. Every single one of their theories about how they expect time travel to work is exactly the way John described it.
And, that kind of goes back, like I was saying a minute ago, maybe, he had to give this information to enable himself to be able to time travel, changing the time, so I guess. Now, can you explain how he explained time travel itself, how it all kind of worked?
Absolutely. And again, this is another thing that you need to get a grip on to understand this.
Okay.
Basically, John said that, well, here's what he described. He said that time travel is like standing in a room that has mirrors on both walls, like when you're in a barber shop. And what the machine allowed you to do was basically step out of your room into the room next to you. And of course, if you look at the images of yourself in those mirrors, they're doing the same thing. So everybody that has the machine, you look in the room, you say, okay, the alternate reality that's next to me, there's a time traveler there that's just like me, and they're doing the same thing. So the way time travel works is that you're not really going forward or backward in your time. What you're doing is you're slipping into an alternate reality. It looks exactly like the one you left, but you're just entering it or leaving it from a different time. So what that means is, and again, go back to these scientists that I just mentioned, because they're saying exactly the same thing now. Time travel is basically a one-way trip. If you go forward to another reality or another alternate universe, and you go forward, say, a day, there's no way to get back to the one that you left, because every time you use the machine, you're going to be jumping into a different alternate reality. So what that means is that if John comes back in time from 2036, he's basically in another universe where anything could happen from the point that he arrived. In other words, the fact that he's here makes it different from the one he was in. Right. So if he were to tell somebody, hey, listen, you're going to die tomorrow in a bus accident on 4th and Elm, well, what would you do if you were told that was going to happen to you? Would you go to 4th and Elm at 4 o'clock? No,
yeah,
you wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So now the fact that you did not die in that bus accident, does that make the time traveler a liar? And I think that's the quandary that we're in. If it really works this way, it's impossible to prove that you're a time traveler. And I think that's the quandary John was in. And I think that might be what we have to get a grip on, is that if it really works that way, then there's no way to look at it the way science fiction does, going forward, killing your grandfather, all those problems. So I think that's one of the things that's important to understand based on what he was talking about.
So would that also go along with that, if you're in a alternate reality, that if you travel back, then you couldn't really change the future?
Well, exactly. What you're doing is you're changing the future in that alternate reality that you're in. And once you leave it, you're not going to be there to experience the changes. You're going to go to another alternate reality. So I think that's the other, that's the other sticking point of being a time traveler, is that if you don't stay, you're not going to be able to experience the changes that you made.
Right.
And actually, if you think about it, that kind of makes sense, because that would mean the only practical application for time travel under those conditions would be to get things. If you needed something in your reality, you could go someplace else where it was, get it, and bring it back. And that's exactly what John was doing.
Very interesting. Now, I want to get into some of his predictions, and I'm kind of really jumping a little ahead of what I wanted to, because we got some listeners in the chat room, and they're wanting to know why he didn't warn us about 9/11, and I found that to be a common question around forums and anywhere, chat rooms, that John Teeter has brought up. Why did he not warn us?
All right, actually, this is my opinion, but I believe he did warn us.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 1998, before John came to the forum, Art Bell got a phone call on his radio show. Actually, I think it was a fax, now that I think about it. And it was a man claiming to be a time traveler. He said his name was John, and he gave a whole list of things that were going to happen in the future. One of the things that he said was that your New York is very similar to mine, but there's a skyscraper missing. So, of course, a lot of people are looking back at that now saying, oh, he's talking about the Twin Towers.
Right.
Now, he might be making a reference to that maybe somebody else could pick up on. But getting back to your question, why didn't he say, boy, this is going to happen? John gave 3 rules about the questions that he would answer when he was here.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he was going to give, don't ask him about any names. If you ask him about a person, he's not going to give you information about that. He's not going to give you any stock tips. In other words, you said, hey, tell me what the price of gold is going to be. He's not going to tell you. And
so wasn't there a question about the Super Bowl that kind of went along those lines?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, people asked him sports questions all the time, and that drove him out of his skull.
All right.
The 3rd rule, he said, is that I'm not going to give anybody any information that would allow them to avoid death by probability, which means I'm not going to tell you where an earthquake is. I'm not going to tell you about plane crashes, and he specifically said plane crash. So if you take his rule, which was I'm not going to tell you if you're going to die, the fact that he mentions a plane crash describing his rule, and that he told Art Bell that there's a skyscraper missing in New York in 1998, a lot of people are looking at that and saying he was left-handedly trying to tell us something was going to happen.
Right. Now, let me, I kind of, because, you know, that also, I wondered about that, and so I kind of formed a little bit of my own opinion. I'm going to share it with you. In reading it, one of the most startling things that he talked about was the World War III in 2015, and he wasn't it? They said it wiped out. Was it 3 billion people?
Right.
So I mean, to me, if I was him, and I had lived through a time where 3 billion people had been wiped off the face of the earth in war in no time. I mean, he calls it a short World War, correct?
Yeah, I believe my take on it is that the actual war, you know, the nuclear weapons, the shooting, the fighting was short, but it was the aftermath where most of the people died. At least that was my take on it.
All right. Well, even at that, if I lived through a time where 3 billion people had been killed, you know, in you know, a few years or whatever the time period may have been, you know, not to sound mean and not to say it's insignificant, but to me, you know, the number that died in 9/11 just wouldn't seem like, you know, like a significant number compared to 3 billion people.
Let me give you an example that he actually used in his post to counter this same argument. And you tell me if this makes any sense.
Okay.
In history, he said that before the attack on Pearl Harbor, they were experimenting with radar. And they actually had a radar post up, and they could see the Japanese planes coming in. Well, they weren't familiar with how it works, so they didn't do anything about it. They thought it was somebody else's planes. They thought it wasn't working correctly. So if you were a time traveler, would you go to that radar station before the attack and say, look, the Japanese planes are coming, and it's real. You need to warn Pearl Harbor so that they're ready for the attack. Now, of course, everybody says, oh, of course, yeah, absolutely I would do that. Well, now let's think about the repercussions of that. What if, because you did that, we were able to fend off the Japanese with no problem, which delayed us getting into World War II, which allowed Hitler to build the atomic bomb? So if you knew that as a time traveler, you'd have to bite your tongue and say, look, I got to let this happen because this event is going to cascade into things that have to happen in order for the world to be better when it's over. And I think that might have been one of the things John was thinking about.
Well, he even kind of hinted at that when somebody asked him about 2012, when he said that it's better off that what happens in 2012 is a surprise.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes. I mean, that makes sense. It does.
The other thing, too, I try to take a little bit of heart in is I don't think John exactly knew the way that our future was going to develop. If you look back at his posts, he specifically said Y2K happened for them on their alternate universe. And it didn't happen for us. So that's already something huge that didn't happen here. So his, talking about the future, he would have to be taking educated guesses or talking about things that had a lot of momentum. For example, the physics of how the time machine worked. That was going to be the same no matter what alternate reality you were in. So he could say that with relative assurance that those kind of things would develop. But, for example, another big criticism he gets is about the Olympics. He said that after 2004 there weren't going to be any more Olympics. Well, if the Olympics come off without a problem, then does that mean he's not a time traveler, or he's just wrong about the way that our future is going to develop?
Right. And, I guess some of the debate on that, too, is whether, is it Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics? I've seen that debate, in other rooms as well.
Well, the other thing, too, is that I'm seeing some news articles floating across my computer that there are some people seriously looking at boycotting the 2008 Olympics. So, I think it's still up into the air. There's a lot of momentum. It looks like it's going to happen, but it's a little strange seeing that kind of stuff come across based on what he said.
Yeah, very. Let's talk about some of the other predictions, and specifically some that have come to pass thus far.
All right, I guess, let's see. I got a little list here. I'm just trying to see what he's got. Let me tell you about one that just happened, just so that, people can say, oh, these things were a long time ago. This one was kind of interesting. This happened a couple of months ago. There was a point in the post where John was asked if he remembers any poetry from the future. And again, remember, this is in 2001. He said, yes, there is a poem that is very popular in the military called A Soldier's Winter. He said it was written by a soldier, excuse me, and he went on to actually recite some of the lines from the poem. Well, lo and behold, I get an email about 2 months ago. In 2005, A Soldier's Winter was actually written by an Army soldier. And if you read the lines, it's very similar to the poem that John read. And he said the poem had been edited and changed over time, but it was a symbol for the way people felt about the future. So is that a wild coincidence, or was that bound to happen? Was a soldier going to write a poem called A Soldier's Winter and he just got lucky, or was that the poem he's talking about? And again, go look this up. This is all on the internet right now.
All right.
Some of the other predictions he made a while ago, he talked about that we would find no WMDs in Iraq. And again, this is even before the first Iraq war. Before we went in, he talked about that. He said that China was going to be the next country to put a man in orbit, and they did that. He specifically talked about the space shuttle having serious problems 2 or 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
He said that Stephen Hawking was going to change his opinion about black holes. Let's see, I'm trying to remember the specifics of that. It was radiation off of mini black holes. He said that Stephen Hawking would eventually change his viewpoint on that, and that's exactly what happened about 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
He talked over and over about mad cow disease and how that was going to come from behind and really hit us. He talked about eventually how our constitutional rights would start to evaporate and be taken away from us, and that happened also. If you read the post, it just goes on and on and on. He talked about viruses being used to cure cancer. And again, just recently, like a couple of months ago, I saw another article where that's exactly what they're doing. They're finding success now using modified viruses to fight cancer. So there's tons of stuff like that in the post about all sorts of subjects that he was asked about when he was here.
I mean, it's just wild that there was some that he just nailed. Now, somebody in the chat room saying something about the soldier, about the poem, and apparently they're saying that the soldier. I mean, is there any indication that they were familiar with Teeter and gave him the idea to write the poem?
Yeah, that's absolutely a possibility too. But okay, I will acknowledge that's a possibility. And I accept that, but let me throw this out back at you now. Imagine you're a time traveler. How do you prove it? If you give a series of predictions, this is one of those cases where you could say, oh, well, just because he said it, that's the reason why I named it that title.
Right.
So again, this goes back to how do you prove you're a time traveler? If every single thing you say, there's always going to be a reason not to believe it. And when I was thinking about this, the only really way to prove it, and this is the irony, would be to take the person along for a trip in time. But if time works the way that John described it, then you're never going to get home to tell anybody that it's real. You're going to be in the same position the time traveler's in. So I find that very ironic that, people say, if time travel's real, how come we don't see them? And maybe this is the reason why, because they know no one's going to believe them.
Now, he said he visited his family while he was here, right?
Correct. When he was asked where is he staying, how is he paying for things, he said that he was staying with his family in 2000, 2001. He also stated that, I know that he was staying with his family when they had him as a young child. So he was actually in contact with the younger version of himself while he was here.
Now, how old would he have been at this time?
Okay, I believe he said he was born 1998. So that would have been about, 2 or 3 years old at that point?
Yeah.
And now that I recall, I even think he said something about that his parents were telling young John that this was his uncle, that visiting from out of town, I guess. But, yeah, apparently that, and I guess he also stated he was using his parents' computer to talk online also.
Now, this also branched out to, I've heard stories of a lawyer that was protecting the Teeter family. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, I followed that, but, this is kind of where, let's see, how do I put this? I like concentrating on what he said and then seeing the news that comes in relating to what people agree that he said online. This is one of those peripheral things where I follow it, but it's one of those things where I have no way of knowing if it's real or not. But I'll tell you what the mythology is. Apparently, when John left, his family lived in Florida, and they moved from Florida to the Midwest. Shortly after that, they had an attorney that was a friend of this other attorney named Larry Haber. And Larry Haber is apparently an entertainment attorney by trade, but he claims to represent the family of John Teeter after they left. And I guess there's a company, I think it's called the John Teeter Foundation. They put out a book. There's talk about doing a movie. There's some stuff online that you can see. And a lot of people sort of get a sour taste in their mouth over this because it looks like it's, about money. But I'm kind of looking at this as, well, if this is real, maybe there's something else going on here that we're not seeing. Maybe there's another chapter to this story that's yet to be told. But this guy's a real attorney. You can look him up online, and that's what he does, so nobody denies that this guy's not for real.
Well, let's kind of get back into the predictions then. And another one that I've seen that was pretty big controversy of whether he was right or whether he was wrong, and even claims that he contradicted himself, was the Civil War in the U.S., where
right.
He claimed it started 04 and even a couple of times 05. So, is there any indication on why he gave 2 different years and exactly what kind of Civil War we're talking about?
Yeah, my take on this is that he said his specific words were that the civil conflict in the United States would begin in 2004, 2005. So you are correct. There's a couple of times where he said 2004, and then he said 2005. And it could have been a typo. But he said the shooting would start in 2008. So I guess a lot of people have said, wow, there's not a full-blown Civil War in 2004. This is all nonsense. But if you look now, this is a couple interesting things that were sent to me. If you look at what's going on in Iraq right now, if he had just used the word Iraq and not USA, every single thing he described about the Civil War is happening over there. The Waco-type incidents, the the civil unrest, all the things that he was describing, if you just used the word Iraq, he would have been right on. The other thing that comes across is if you look at what's happening now with illegal aliens, a lot of people are saying that that's the conflict that's going to grow and begin in 2008. And I got to tell you, I watched some of the news, seeing some of these rallies and some of the conflict going on over that, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's something, if that doesn't heat up in the next couple of years.
See, that's the hard thing is just trying to figure out what he might be talking about, and I guess trying to think of how people might perceive it. To me, especially on this one, civil conflict. You think about it, and obviously, through school, you're taught about the Civil War, so maybe. I don't believe either way at this point. Is he or is he not a time traveler? But, I've kind of rationalized what he says. But, you're taught about the Civil War through school, and you think maybe a lot of us have that embedded in our mind to exactly what a civil conflict is, that we should be drawing arms and killing each other over our own views.
Right. Well, could it be, again, I hate to say this, but if it's over illegal immigration, is that the conflict? Is it Republicans versus Democrats? Is it the tax man coming to your door? It's hard to describe exactly what a civil conflict would look like. And here's another point just to muddy the water, and somebody else pointed this out to me too. John may have been exactly who he said he was, but he also may have been a liar. So if you believe he's a time traveler, he might not have been telling the truth, or he might have been altering things so that he could get a message out there to somebody else that's not us.
Right.
So, just if you say, okay, it's all BS, then that's fine. If you say, oh, I believe it, I don't believe it, then you got to kind of say in your mind, he's human like us. He might not have been doing all this for our benefit. He might have been trying to do something else, and he might have been lying.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely a different way to think about it. Now, what did he say about his time? And he was from 2036. What did he say about it?
Well, the main difference between what I hope our 2036 looks like and his was, of course, this huge world war that is supposed to start in 2015. In looking at the posts, my opinion is that Y2K precipitated a lot of what led up to this. They must have had it, they must have recovered at some point, and then that may have been a launching pad into whatever happened in his time. But if you look at some of the things that he talks about, for example, the political alignments with China and Japan and Korea and Europe and Russia, a lot of those things, again, I'll use the word momentum, they seem to be coming to pass. He talks about the relationship between China and Russia. He talks about their nuclear program. He talks about who fights who in the war. And when you look at, if we're on the doorstep now of a conflict in Iran, how far away are we from a nuclear conflict that might lead to this war? His war started in 2015. Apparently it was so devastating, so many people died, that basically the world was recovering. And the United States that he describes, some people have called it communistic, some people have said he's obviously a libertarian, but it seems to be more rural and more community-based. He talks a lot about how the relationships with family, the relationship with your neighbor, are much more important than they are with us. And he was amazed at, I guess, how blind we are going through our lives, concerned about Britney Spears and TV, and all these things are absolutely, totally alien to him. In fact, I believe one of the examples that he gave, he said, have you ever been in a situation where all the power goes out in your house? And, for a few minutes you're inside, you get your flashlights, you get your candles, but then eventually you go outside and you start communicating with your neighbors. How are you? Is everything okay? Do you have enough batteries for your flashlights? And to me, that's basically the way the future developed, was that basically the power went out and we were all forced to go outside and actually talk to our neighbor. And I think that was the future that John was in and that he cherished so much, even though he had to go through so much pain to get there.
Yeah, that does make sense. What about military? Did he talk about any aspects of the military and how they handled time travel?
Well, again, this is my take, but you can read this for yourself. My impression was that John was no fan of the organized military that we have now. In other words, the conflict that he was in after 2015 was against what was left of our military. So, either he was in some sort of a militia or he was in some sort of National Guard, but there was definitely conflict on that level. So when that war was over, I guess the military reformatted itself from, the side that won, and it was after that where apparently time travel was invented. And he describes, he was asked if there were any other time travelers. I think he said there was maybe 5 or 6 more. And he even said that some of them, there were 5 or 6 more on his team or in his unit, and some of them had different types of jobs, and their job was to go back and get things. And he said that there was 2 or 3 others, I believe, and that there were other time machines. So apparently the military had this technology. They did use it. And he also said it wasn't a secret. He said that, people in 2036 are aware that this technology exists, and they were even talking about creating a power source out of the way the time machine worked, and that he expected in the future that time travel would be something that, civilians would be doing soon.
That was something that I found very, very interesting about saying that it was no secret that they were doing time travel. I mean, you think of how secretive our military is.
Well, that's a good point, but, again, think about the society that he was describing. Maybe, I do understand the reason for military secrecy and national security, but maybe things were different then. Maybe there was more truth going around than there is today.
Yeah, and like you had mentioned about the war killing so many people in this timeline, and that's probably going to make people look at things differently. And like I said, I just found that interesting in that aspect, that it seemed like he lived in a more truthful time, which is definitely something we could use now.
Well, another story that he told that just reminded me of, and this I think he told us almost right before he left. He said that one day he was in the car with his parents, and they were driving down the highway, and they saw somebody on the side of the road that was walking with a gas can. And he was telling his parents, look, we got to pull over and help this guy. And his parents were saying, no, we can't do that. He might harm us, or, there's a gas station just down the road. And this concept caught John by surprise. He did not understand why we don't help each other as much as I guess they do in his future. And he said that you don't know who this person is. This person could have the cure for cancer. This person could be somebody that really does something important, and it's our responsibility to help him. So that always struck me as, a little telling that really bothered him, the fact that we seem to be oblivious to, everyday problems that people have around us, and we don't help them.
Now, looking at his military logo, have you tried to figure out what that possibly might represent, or did John ever say?
He did. He did describe that. I don't have it in front of me, but I do remember what it looks like. He said that those curved lines represent I don't know, for lack of a better term, the gravitational field that his time machine made. And I believe there are 2 lines on it. One, I think, goes to the center, and then one goes a little off-center. He said that the line that goes to the center, I think it's a curved line that goes through the center of the logo. He said that line represents the path that you want to go on, and the other line represents the path to God, which is the time machine doesn't take you where you want to go. So I guess it's a symbol of, the time machine isn't 100% accurate, and it's kind of a crapshoot every time you use it. But that was something that was accepted, and they worked that into the logo.
Yeah, looking at the pictures of it, I mean, it's amazing to look at, but it's not what you would expect. I mean, I guess we're so, everything's Hollywood in our minds, so I guess it's just not what we pictured. Did he not use 2 different vehicles?
Yeah, okay, now this gets a little weird, but it's one of those things where you go, this is too weird to make up. I mean, Apparently, when he went back to 1975, there weren't a whole lot of vehicles around that would fit into that era. And when you think about it, okay, yeah, that would be a problem. You know, you don't want to show up in a 2000 minivan when you're going back to 1975.
Right.
So apparently, the car that he took was a 1966 or 67 Corvette. And that was the first machine he went back. You know, in other words, you put the suitcase in the car, and then you turn it on, and that goes with you, and you can drive around with it. And again, he said, yeah, the car had a heavy enough suspension, and it was the only decent car that we could find. I guess they found it in a museum, I think he said. Maybe I'm making that up. I thought he said that.
Yeah.
And then apparently his parents had to explain to him, no, you don't understand. You're drawing attention to yourself driving that thing around. And that shocked him because he didn't understand that.
Yeah.
And then apparently when he got here, he changed vehicles, and I guess it was what was it? I think it was a Chevy truck that he used when he drove around, yeah.
But, just for those listeners that maybe have tuned in a little late, we do have some of the photos on our homepage, shadowsinthedarkradio.com, and Oliver has the same photos. They're all over the internet on his website, johnteeter.com. So you can go check these out on either one. Some of the stuff we're talking about, the logo, the time machine. There is some pictures of where that Teeter posted himself of the inside of the Corvette, the inside of the truck. You can kind of see the differences there. Now, what exactly are your thoughts on it? I mean, do you believe he was a time traveler? Do you believe it's a hoax? Or, you just are just kind of right in the middle?
Yeah, for me, I enjoy the experience of being shocked by stuff I see in the news. So I go back and forth. Periods of time go on where nothing seems to be happening, and this seems to be, a good story. But then you see things in the news like, what got me recently was all of these reputable physicists now coming out and describing their time machine. It's exactly the way John described it. I go, that can't be a coincidence. So I go back and forth. But I will tell you this. If CERN announces in the next couple of years that they expect to be able to create these mini black holes and capture them somehow, then I'm going to be sold. I don't know how you could be lucky to make something like that up. So if that happens, I'm going to be sold that this guy was definitely who he said he was.
What has been the most fascinating thing in this story for you?
Okay, for me, from my personal viewpoint, the absolute polarization that these posts seem to have on people. Every week, I get at least 5 or 6 death threats because of our website. People that say, I'm propagating a hoax that's affecting millions of people for the worst, and if we find out who you are, we're coming to your house and we're going to take care of you. I get an email like that all the time. And then the other side is, I get email from people saying, hey, I'm buying my canned food, my ammunition now, and I'm headed for the mountains. So it goes both ways. There are people that are really afraid of this and believe it, and then there are people that are very violently against this for whatever reason. And, they spent 7 years trying to debunk this and convince people that it's not real. I just don't understand how people can have the energy to do that all the time. That's what amazes me.
Yeah. And, like I say, this is coming up on this 7th year, and it still is out there being talked about on a regular basis. I just messed around today just searching around on Google, and it's all over the place. Even recent posts.
Oh, I agree. I see it. It's interesting that I don't know if this has been your experience or not with other subjects, but I'm seeing it migrate off of the chat forums, and now it's ending up in people's personal blogs. I have a Google alert for a blog come in at least once an hour, and I'll tell you something else funny. Just recently they did a Star Trek DVD collection about time travel, and the reviewer actually used the word teeter as a adverb or as an adjective to describe the DVD. So I find it fascinating that his name is now part of our lexicon when it comes to time travel. It's just amazing that could happen.
Oh, well, that is. Now, there was something on your website about a John Teeter movie. Is this something that had come out or is coming out?
Yeah, this is one of those things where you look at it and you go, what's really going on here? This Larry Haber, who claims to represent the family, has been making some noises about a film coming out. And if you go to YouTube, they've got a little clip there, and there's another longer clip that, actually on our website, you can see, and anybody can do this. If you go to brightcove.com, you can grab the code for this player, and you can stick it on your blog or whatever. But you can actually buy a little clip of Parent Movie from them. And I've watched all of this stuff, and it's not, awful, but it's definitely gives you the impression that there's something else going on here besides a movie. Like it's almost like The Post, the same feeling. And when you watch it, you go, okay, what are they really trying to say, and who are they trying to say it to? So it's been sort of a clumsy attempt to bring it out, in my opinion. But I'm wondering if there's not something else going on.
Did John ever say that he completed his mission, that he retrieved the computer he was here for, and that's why he left?
He did. He did get the computer, and he did get back with it, or he expected to. My feeling is the reason he was here talking online had something to do with his family. And the speculation is, and this gets a little weird, but this is what people think, whatever he did in the 70s, getting the computer, interacting with his grandfather, being at IBM, whatever he did there, he did something that stopped Y2K for us. Now that may seem really, really ridiculous, but think about it. Back in 1999, everybody was convinced, well, a lot of people were convinced, that this was going to be a real event and it was going to be a disaster.
Oh.
And when it happened, it was almost like nothing. I mean, I can't even remember anything significant from the people that said we were all going to have a disaster where anything happened. And I think that's a little strange. So the idea is that he did something there which stopped Y2K, and he was concerned about that, which is why he was here in the year 2000.
Now, did he make some kind of reference to Y2K? I can't remember exactly how it was.
He did. He talked about it as a huge factor from where he came from, and he also made some cryptic remarks that he had something to do with it here. So that I think is where the speculation comes from.
Yeah, I was trying to remember kind of his exact words, because it was, like you say, it was cryptic, and he said something along the lines of, I can't remember, like...
he says, how do you know I haven't already done something to screw up your future? I think that was the way he put it, actually.
Yeah.
That was the other point he made. He said, a lot of the questions he was getting were, hey, if you're a real time traveler, then you could be messing things up for us right now. And his response was, he says, you have the same potential to mess things up as I do. In fact, I see you do it every day. He said, don't lecture me on screwing up your future. You guys are doing a fine job of it yourselves.
And, really reading his post, just the way that he talked to people, it was very stern. It wasn't wishy-washy. I mean, he was just straight out with the answer, and it was very to the point. And the way he handled the nonsense questions, like we mentioned earlier, the Super Bowl question. Somebody asked him who was going to win the Super Bowl in 2001, and what was his comment? It was, can you tell me if it rained in New York in 1932? You're part of their future. Won't you tell me, or something like that?
Right. I'm looking through my notes here. So, okay, here it is. He was asked. Okay, this is December 10th of 2000. He was asked who won the Super Bowl. And he didn't give a direct answer. He said, if you went into the past and you can remember if it rained in New York, what would you say? And I think a lot of people pointed at that and said, hey, I think it was the New York Giants that won that year. So it's kind of strange that you would mention the city of the team that ended up winning the Super Bowl in a left-handed way of insulting them for asking them such a stupid question.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's a very fascinating story, and I want to encourage anyone to especially visit your site, because you've done a wonderful job of putting all these on there. It's very organized, and like I said, you can get hooked on it. And just the other day at work, I was showing one of my coworkers, and he went home and said he spent like 2 or 3 hours on it at home after he left work.
I think that's the trap. That's exactly what got me. Is you look at that stuff and you just can't take your eyes off it. You know, if you don't mind me saying, we just recently we're doing a little experiment where I've got it's sort of like a video podcast where you can listen to, you know, if something significant happens, I'll put it to audio and you can download it from our website if you go take a look at it.
Wonderful. Well, Oliver, I really appreciate you coming on. We've maybe got about a minute here for him. We'll close out the show. So if you would just give anybody any kind of way they can get in touch with you with any kind of information or any websites or anything you would like to give them.
Absolutely. You can email me at jteditor at johnteeter.com. You can get that address at our website, which is johnteeter.com. And I can't guarantee I'll answer everybody, but if somebody finds something significant in the news, you know, I look up a black hole, time travel, time machine, Z-machine, all the things that he mentioned. I try to look that stuff up on a routine basis, and I'll find something. So if anybody finds anything, please send it to me.
Well, Oliver, I really appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I was looking forward to this show because I mean this topic itself just invokes so much thought, and it's one of those ones where you just stay in the sentence, like was it a hoax, was it not? I mean, it goes back and forth. So I want to really thank you for coming on and sharing you know, what you've done with this topic.
No problem. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I hope you join us again sometime.
Thank you, sir.
All right, have a good night. All right, again, that was Oliver Williams. Check out his site, johnteeter.com. I'm telling you, it is a wonderful site. He has done a great job of organizing all the information that John Teeter that's out there. And yes, you will get hooked reading this because it is very interesting. Whether you believe it's true or not, it is still interesting. Like I said, I mean, I'm both ways on it. You know, I don't know if it's a hoax. I don't know if he's really a time traveler or not. I mean, I'm a believer of possibilities, so yeah, it's possible he is. But still, it is still very, very fascinating to check out what he did say, how he explained the future, how he explained time travel. You know, just everything he had to say. He was it seemed like a very intelligent person, whether it was a hoax or not. And as we've said, he did make some predictions that have come to pass. So I guess we'll just have to see on some of the other ones. Again, Oliver Williams' site is johnteeter.com. That's JOHNTITOR.com. We've got it linked on our website. If you have any problem with it, you can just go to shadowsinthedarkradio.com, click on the link. We've got it on our homepage right now, or vision, you know, any of our past shows or anything like that. And check out the picture scrolling on our homepage there. There's some of the images that John Teeter posted himself on his little stay. Well, again, we'd like to thank everyone for listening. We always enjoy having you around, and we appreciate your support. And thanks again to Oliver Williams for joining us tonight. A very fascinating topic. You can check out his website, like I said, johnteeter.com. And also, be sure to tune in this Sunday at 9:30 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when our guest will be George Smart. We're going to try again on the Knights Templar and the Holy Grail. If you remember, we tried to have him on, had some problems with phones, so we have got it rescheduled. That's going to be the 30th at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to talk about the Knights Templar and the Holy Grail. It's going to be a really fun topic to talk about. I'm looking forward to that. So I hope you join in. I hope you check it out with us. Very mysterious brotherhood. Don't forget to check out our website, like we mentioned earlier, shadowsinthedarkradio.com. We have our sister site, Eastern Paranormal Investigators.com. Here on Blog Talk Radio, we're at blogtalkradio.com, Shadows in the Dark. And on MySpace, myspace.com/Shadows in the Dark Radio. Stop by, drop us a friend request. We'll accept it. We'll take all the friends we can get. Shadows in the Dark was created, produced, and hosted by Jeremiah Greer. Music was provided by Shane Greer. Again, we appreciate everyone joining us, and always remember to be watchful of those shadows in the dark.
Shadows in the dark.
Dear Art, I had to fax when I heard other time travelers calling in from any time past the year 2500 AD. Please let me explain. Time travel was invented in 2034. Offshoots of certain successful fusion reactor research allowed scientists at CERN to produce the world's first contained singularity engine. The basic design involves rotating singularities inside a magnetic field. By altering the speed and direction of rotation, you can travel both forward and backward in time. Time itself can be understood in terms of connected lines. When you go back in time, you travel on your original timeline. When you turn the singularity engine off, a new timeline is created due to the fact that you and your time machine are now there. In other words, a new universe is created. To get back to your original line, you must travel a split second farther back and immediately throw the engine into forward without turning it off. Some interesting outcomes of this are: 1. You meet yourself. I have done it often, even taken a younger version of myself along for a few rides before returning myself to the new timeline and going back to mine. 2. You can alter history in the new universe that you have just created. Most of the time, the changes are subtle. Sometimes I'll notice car models that don't exist or books that come out late. The oldest one was a skyscraper that wasn't built in a near-favorite store of mine in New York. Interestingly, when you travel in time, you must compensate for the orbit of the Earth. Since the time machine doesn't move, you have to adjust the engine so you remain on the planet when you turn it off. Unfortunately, it was also discovered that anyone going forward in time from my 2036 hit a brick wall in the year 2564. Everyone who has ever been there has reported that nothing exists. When the machine is turned off, you find yourself surrounded by blackness and silence. Whew. Now, most time travelers are trying to find out where the line went bad by going into the past, creating a new universe, and proceeding forward to see if the same thing results in 2564. It appears the line went bad around the year 2000. I'm here now in this time to test a few theories of mine before going forward. Now, for the future, you might want to know about. 1. Y2K is a disaster. Many people die on the highways when they freeze to death trying to get to warmer weather. 2. The government tries to keep power by instituting martial law, but all of it collapses when their efforts to bring the power back up fail. 3. A power facility in Denver is able to restart itself, but is mobbed by hundreds of thousands of people and destroyed. This convinces most that maybe we shouldn't bring the old system back up. 4. A few years later, communal government system is developed after the Constitution takes a few twists. China retakes Taiwan. Israel wins the largest battle for their life, and Russia is covered in nuclear snow from their collapsed reactors. Art, the reason I'm here now is because I believe a nuclear weapon set off by Iraq in the Middle East war with Israel might have something to do with the damaged timeline. I will test that theory and get back to you. Please pray that we discover the reason why there is no apparent future after 2564. So I couldn't resist. I thought that was quite a good fax. There you have it.